All right, turn to Ecclesiastes chapter 3. Ecclesiastes chapter 3. That ever-swinging pendulum here in Ecclesiastes chapter 3, that each thing has its season, each thing has its purpose, and everything is beautiful in His time. As you combine these thoughts, you obviously see that wisdom and discernment is always needed, because these things that are presented in Ecclesiastes chapter 3 are opposites. Right? And if there's a time for each one, the natural question is, okay, when? When is the time for each one of these? In Ecclesiastes chapter 3, and in verse number 7, it says, a time to rend and a time to sow, a time to keep silence and a time to speak. The Bible tells us that a word fitly spoken, it's like apples of gold and pictures of silver. That word fitly carries with it the idea of timely, right? The right word at the right time is beautiful. It's helpful. It's encouraging. It's needed. But that same word at an inappropriate time could cause much damage. It could cause much harm. That's in Proverbs chapter 25, verse 11. The Bible also says in Proverbs chapter 15, and verse 23, Proverbs 15 and verse 23, that a man hath joy by the answer of his mouth, and a word spoken in due season, how good is it? So these words that are spoken, that are timely, that are fitting, that are spoken in due season, great, helpful, encouraging, necessary. And yet the same thing can be said the other way. The Bible tells us in James chapter 3 and verse number 8 that the tongue is an unruly evil. It's full of deadly poison. The tongue can be used in exactly the opposite way. To slander, to hurt, to cut down. It could be unhelpful. It could be unhelpful at times. It could be disastrous. And so the question is asked, right, when it says, okay, if there's a time for silence and if there is a time for speaking, how do I know which one is which? Where is the help? Where is the understanding for that, right? Wisdom and discernment is absolutely needed, because I know that my tongue can both be a great asset and a great help to someone. I also know that it could be detrimental. And that's not just to someone. It could also be to myself. My tongue can do great things. It could also get me in a world of trouble, right? So we have to have that wisdom. We have to have that discernment. And what we'll do here is take a couple of weeks to get into some of the scriptural advice. And not just what we say, but when it's a good time to be silent and when it is a good time to speak. Both are beautiful in their time. Both have their place. Everything has their time and their season. And we certainly want our words to be fitly spoken. We want them to be timely. We want it to be in due season, as the scripture would say. So let's talk about that this next couple of weeks. Of course, this morning, let's start with the silence part of that. The Bible gives us sound advice on the subject of silence. Now, number one, let me just give you this general principle. Turn to Proverbs chapter 29, if you would. Proverbs chapter 29. This is the general principle before we get too deep into it. Proverbs 29. The inability to control the mouth shows a lack of wisdom. And the inability to control our mouths shows a lack of spirituality. In Proverbs chapter 29 and verse number 11, it says, a fool uttereth all his mind, but a wise man keepeth it in until afterwards. You do not always have to say everything that you think, right? Just because it comes into your mind, just because you're thinking it, does not mean that it's always helpful to blurt out, right? To spit out, to say. A fool does that. A fool likes to hear themselves talk. A fool can't help it any other way, right? It's called words in the Bible is called the sacrifice of fools. It's not wise. The inability to control our mouth is a lack of wisdom. Now, on the subject of self-control, the Bible tells us that temperance is the fruit of the Spirit. Now, we do not want to treat our tongues or our mouths as their own entities that don't fall under those guidelines of self-control and wisdom. Sometimes when we read through the fruit of the Spirit and we talk about temperance and we talk about self-control, if we're not careful, we may just kind of put that in a little box somewhere, like, oh, well, that's talking about lust. And the fruit of the Spirit is being able to control, your lust and not being able, not giving into temptation and exercising that realm of self-control. That is a great application of that. That is extremely helpful. That is absolutely true that temperance and self-control does, in a sense, deal with lust. That's not all that we're supposed to be controlled, right? That's not all that we can control. The fruit of the Spirit is temperance. It is self-control. It is the ability to control even things like our tongue. We won't want to disregard that. We don't want to think that what we say, our relationships with people, how we interact with them, that doesn't fall under those guidelines. It does. It is a foolish man that uttereth all his mind. Wisdom is supposed to govern us. In Proverbs 17, and there's certainly a lot of Proverbs that deal with this subject, and we'll cover some of them this morning, and I'm sure in the next couple of weeks. But Proverbs chapter 17, and again, this is the general principle. Proverbs 17, verse 27, he that hath knowledge spareth his words, and a man of understanding is of excellent spirit. That ability, right, to control when you say something. Not just what you say, but when you say it. You do not want to be someone that can't control yourself, right? That is unbecoming for a Christian. And Proverbs tells us, it talks about the man that can't control himself. He's like the city that's broken down without walls. He's vulnerable. He's weak. We want to apply those ideas and those concepts of self-control to every aspect of our lives, okay? So that would include the things that we say. And the fool, the wise man, according to this, he that hath knowledge spareth his words. The mouth that is always moving is not a wise mouth, okay? You don't have to say everything that you think, okay? That is not a sign of weakness, right? Well, I had an opinion, or I wanted to say something, or I'm thinking this, or I'm thinking that. That's okay. You don't have to say everything that pops in there. And be honest, you don't want to say everything that pops into there. We're still sinners. We're still at times governed by impractical and unhelpful thoughts. So that's a guiding principle, right? This concept of self-control, we certainly can, because the Bible tells us that it's a fruit of the Spirit. As the Spirit works in our lives, one of those things that is produced is self-control. And we can control our mouths. We can control what we say and when we say it. So that's the guarding principle. But what about the when? Okay? When should we say something? When should we not say something? That's kind of the idea for today. When should we not? Well, there's several scriptures I think that will help at a time that it's okay to hush, right? It's okay to not say anything It's okay to not get involved. It's okay to not speak your mind. It's okay to not share your opinion. Not only is it not okay to do it, it's probably the right thing to do. To just sit, just listen, don't speak. Oh, I got a list here. We'll see how many we can get through. Turn to Proverbs chapter 18. You're probably close to it there. If you're there in 17, just jump over a page to Proverbs 18. Proverbs 18 verse 13 says that he that answereth a matter before he heareth it, it is a folly and a shame unto him. Now, one time that is certainly good to be cautious of speaking and is certainly wise to be silent is, the Bible would say, if we don't have any knowledge, if we're unaware. Do we know of that which we speak? Have you ever said something, gotten involved, spoke your mind, spoke your piece, and then later regretted it because you learned that you didn't have all of the information? And had you knew then what you knew now, your advice would have been different. The thing that you would have said would have been different. Now, I think we all have, right? We've all had scenarios like that we've regretted because more information comes out. We learn something further down the road, and we kind of regret maybe something that we would say. Wisdom tells us that if we know that our knowledge is limited, if we've not heard the whole story, let's kind of keep that to ourselves then, right? Let's kind of be quiet in those times. He that answereth a matter before he heareth it, it is a folly. It is a shame unto him. Have we heard a matter fully? You know, there's a couple of things about that. If you haven't heard a matter fully, if you're going to speak on a subject of which you are not knowledgeable, first of all, that shows a high degree of arrogance, right? That shows a pride that you just have the assumption, or I have the assumption, I don't know everything about this, but, you know, I should be able to fill in the gaps. No, I don't know everything, and there's parts of the story that's missing, and there's pieces over here that I'm not really aware of, but, I mean, I think I can just put the rest of the pieces together based on what I know, and I should be able to fill in the gaps, and I'm pretty sure I know how so-and-so will react, and I'm pretty sure I know how so-and-so would be impacted by this, and eventually I'm starting to come to the realization, like, actually, there's a lot more that I don't know than I actually do know. And if that be the case, it's a folly and a shame to answer a matter before you hear it. It does show a great degree of pride that, you know, no, I don't know everything, but I'll just go ahead and give my opinion anyway. And I'll fill in the gaps, and I'll, you know, assume some stuff. Don't do that. That's not wise. That's not helpful. Not only is it arrogant, it's rude. You know, if someone's, this just can go into the practical ways that you deal with each other, right? He that answereth a matter before he heareth it. If somebody's talking to you, if somebody's telling you a story, if somebody's telling you information, don't cut people off. That's just rude, right? To enjoin yourself into something before you've actually heard it, before you've had knowledge of the situation, it's not helpful. We have classes, right? We have workshops and things at work. This isn't just a spiritual lesson, right? It's a practical lesson. What's the number one rule of teaching? John Milton Gregory wrote a book years ago about the 7 laws of the teacher. What's the number one rule of teaching? Number one rule is that you have to be associated with the subject matter at hand, right? If I were to stand, not behind the pulpit in church, of course, but if I were to, you know, give a lecture somewhere about makeup, I don't know anything about that stuff. I am not the guy to be asking about that. Practical things, like at work I mentioned, we have workshops that teach people about, you know, the processes that we have and the things that our software can do. Generally, we don't ask somebody that just got hired last week, hey, you're going to do the workshop next month. They actually need to grow. They need to become acquainted with the subject matter themselves before they can teach it, right? It would be foolish. It would be foolish of us to put them in that situation. It would be foolish of us to presume to try to teach on a subject of which we're not fully aware, right? There are some avenues of knowledge that you are probably and myself and in any of us, we're probably pretty good spokesmen for those subjects. But like I said, there are some subjects I don't know anything about. Don't ask me. And it would be silly for me to interject an opinion. It would be silly for me to interject an idea when I don't know. I just don't know. We live in an age, and I'll say this under this same topic if there's no knowledge. We live in an age where everything is emotionally driven. People have opinions, and it doesn't have it may not at all be based in any kind of fact or evidence or real knowledge. But if it makes somebody, everybody has an opinion because they feel some way, right? That's not helpful, right? And that is not wise to just be someone that speaks always from emotion and to just be emotionally driven on that. He that answereth a matter before he heareth it is obviously intended to show that someone speaking that does not have knowledge of the situation is not helpful. We live in a culture that is terrible about this, okay? And I think about the kids, and as they get older and as social media and those kind of things become the driving news force, you can't, you have to be cautious, right? Because a lot of the things that are out there are someone's opinion, and that opinion is based upon how things have made them feel. It's not actually based in any kind of realism. It's not based in any kind of fact. We are the soundbite culture, right? That takes clips of what people might say, and we'll take a 30-minute speech and we'll chop out 40 seconds of it because that's the part that speaks to my narrative. We do that, and that's not just political talk. That's not just social media talk. We do that at times, right? We do not always represent things accurately, faithfully, and correctly, and that's wrong. Not only do we not want to speak before we're fully informed on a matter, I do not want to, I don't want to put you in a position where you do not have correct information, where you do not have all of the info that would be needed to make a wise decision. So if there's no knowledge, he says it's foolish, right? Do you have knowledge of the subject at hand? Has this been verified? It is interesting that the Bible speaks to those ideas and the cautiousness that we should have before we speak on a matter of which we're not aware. Okay? Ask questions. Take some time to learn information. If you're asked a question, it's okay to say, I don't know. I've learned, if you're like me and somebody asks you a question, there's almost a sense of embarrassment, right? Having to say, I don't know. Because a lot of times you're thinking, this person came to me because they thought I would know the answer. And it's kind of embarrassing when you don't know the answer, right? Yeah, I get that. And I feel that way at times too. There's something more embarrassing, though, than saying, I don't know. It's going back later and saying, I was wrong. I gave you the wrong information. That feels worse, okay? So I know we don't like to say, I don't know, but it is okay to say that. It is okay to say, let me look at that. Let me find out. And then start to ask the questions so you can make a fully formed understanding. Turn to Proverbs chapter 26. Proverbs chapter 26. When are some times to be silent? Here's one that's pretty practical. Proverbs 26, verse 17 says, it's a good idea to be silent if it's none of your business. Proverbs 26, verse 17, he that passeth by and meddleth with strife not belonging not to him is like one that taketh a dog by the ears. Now that's Old English, right? You guys probably didn't know that the Bible tells us that if it's none of your business, stay out of it. That's wise. That's helpful, though, to know that if you've got something that's going on between two folks over here, it's not the height of spirituality to pluck yourself right into the middle of that, right? It's not wise and it's not spiritual to drop yourself into every matter of controversy. Every time something is wrong, every time there's a disagreement, every time that there's a little friction between two, that's not a warrant for, well, I can fix that, or I can jump in there. No, that's not true. You don't have to intrude, and don't allow others to bring you into their quarrels, right? As you guys grow and as you mature and you learn wisdom, when people try to bring you into their fights, hey, what do you think? I think I'm going to go over here. Don't feel like you have to be brought into every matter of controversy. Don't feel that every subject on which there is disagreement has to have your highest priority, your highest attention until it is resolved, okay? There's a lot of conflict, there's a lot of bickering, there's a lot of trouble that goes on between people, and if you try to meddle in every problem that's not yours, every problem becomes yours. And you just end up with a lot more headache. You end up with a lot more trouble than you had to. He that meddleth, he that passeth by and meddleth with strife, belonging not to him, is like one that taketh a dog by the ears. You are asking to get bit, right? That's what the Bible is. The Bible is so good in word pictures, right? This idea of how foolish and how silly it would be for you to just randomly go and grab a dog by the ears and just ask him to bite. You are begging to get hurt. You're begging to get bit. That's the man that passeth by and meddles himself in every quarrel that's not his. Every bit of strife, even if it's not his, he involves himself. He's asking for trouble. Okay? So there are some times that, yeah, that's actually correct. It's wise to, I'm going to stay out of that. I'm not getting involved in that. This is a no-win situation, right? You learn as you get older, too, that there are some conflicts where neither of them are right. And if you get involved and you start taking sides, you're just asking for trouble with that, right? So be cautious with that. And the Bible gives us that kind of wisdom. Proverbs chapter 14. Proverbs chapter 14. A time that it's wise to be silent is in the heat of anger. In the heat of anger. Proverbs 14, verse 17. He that is soon angry dealeth foolishly, and a man of wicked devices is hated. That's wisdom right there, right? That when anger pops up, and when anger comes in quick, what results from that? Folly. You got to learn to calm down before you start responding. You've got to learn to take a quietness. Do not respond in heat. Do not respond in anger. Can you ask yourself questions? Can you say something? Can you get involved? And, as something starts escalating, can you say what you have to say without screaming it, without hollering it? Can you say it without getting red in the face? Can you say it without your blood pressure boiling? Can you say something and it not be in the heat of anger? This is one of those scenarios where it's not saying, and I'm not saying that you don't need to say something, but wisdom teaches you maybe I should not say something right now. That's right. Everything's beautiful in its season. There's a time to every purpose under heaven. There's the time for silence. There's the time to speak. That doesn't mean that the scenario you're involved in necessarily is one of silence, but it could be that the timing dictates that, okay, right now is not wise. I'm mad. I'm frustrated. If I say something, I'm going to say something I regret. You learn yourself, you learn your nature, and wisdom teaches you that there are times that are like, okay, I need to say something, but if I say something right now, it's not going to be helpful. I'm going to regret it. It's not wise. You calm yourself. You allow your thoughts to be well developed, and you approach a subject more cautiously or calmly, and that'll be more well received anyway. He that is soon angry dealeth foolishly. If you react in anger, you can expect foolishness to follow. That's just the principle that it gives there. So be cautious of that. In the heat of anger, be careful. Be careful of speaking when you are just of a mind to be critical. Okay? Turn to James chapter 3. And again, these lessons are not about just what to say, it's when to say it. There are times that criticism, rebuke, and instruction, it's absolutely necessary, right? And the Bible actually has a lot to say. Goodness, there's a lot of Proverbs about the person that can't listen to rebuke or won't take rebuke. He's foolish. But you also have to be careful when you know that you are just right now of a mind to be critical. You are of a mind to be hurtful. You're in a bad mood, and you don't care if you're going to be hurtful in the things you say. You have to be cautious with that. In James chapter 3, in verse number 9, the Bible says, therewith, and obviously this is the passage that deals with the tongue. It's the one that talks about, we put bits in horses' mouth. It talks about ships being steered by that rudder, and though it's so small, it can control so much. Our tongues being like flames of fire. That's kind of the context here. But what does it say in verse 9? Therewith we bless God, even the Father. And therewith curse we men, which are made after the similitude of God. Out of the same mouth proceeded blessing and cursing. My brethren, these things ought not to be. Do those things fit? Is really the question there, right? Out of the same mouth goes blessing and cursing. My brethren, these things ought not so to be. It's obvious that those things don't match, right? Your mouth, you came today and you want to use your mouth to bless God, right? To praise, to worship. We're going to pray. We're going to sing songs. We're going to enjoy fellowship. We're going to enjoy, talking back and forth. We've got big stuff that we're talking about. We want to be spiritually minded as we talk about spiritual things and the future of our church. Is that the same mouth, though, that yesterday was backbiting and criticizing and cutting down? What does verse number 9 say? Therewith we bless God, even the Father, and therewith we curse men which are made after the similitude of God. Men that were made in God's image, that we use these mouths to cut down. It doesn't seem like it's fitting that our mouth could cut down people made in the image of God, and then the next day show up in His house and use that same mouth to bless God. Right? There's this caution on how we use our mouths. And this concept of just being critical for critical's sake, and we're not talking about an honest rebuke, we're not talking about an honest, practical, or constructive criticism. We're just talking about that mindset, that critical spirit, that attacking spirit. The Bible says in Proverbs chapter 10 that slander makes you a fool. Let me read that. Proverbs chapter 10. Proverbs chapter 10. The mouth that is used to bless God should be cautious in how it attacks others. Okay? That's the gist of that. Proverbs chapter 10. If we're going to use these mouths to bless God, we should be cautious in how we use them in speaking to others. That's just practical, right? That's wisdom. That's good, sound advice the Bible gives us. Proverbs chapter 10 and verse number 18. He that hideth hatred with lying lips, and he that uttereth slander is a fool. Slandering makes you a fool. Brother John just recently came through Ephesians chapter 4. The things that we should be putting away, some of the things there in Ephesians 4, verse number 31, the way that our mouth is used, those things need to be put away. And then in James chapter 4 and verse number 11, It says, speak not evil one of another, brethren. He that speaketh evil of his brother and judgeth his brother, speaking evil of the law, or speaketh evil of the law, and judgeth the law. But if thou but if thou judge the law, thou art not a doer of the law, but a judge. This carefulness, this caution in the evil speaking, right? So the wise person thinks about that, right? That when he's in a bad mood and he's spouting off at the mouth, take some time to think, you know what, this is the same mouth that's going to show up on the Lord's day and want praise to be received, want prayers to be heard. If I'm going to use my mouth in that way, I can't neglect then my mouth the rest of the week. I can't neglect my mouth in how I talk to other people that are made in God's image. No, when I talk to you, I'm not talking to God, but I'm talking to people that are made in God's image. And I know that the day is coming that the things out of my mouth, are going straight to the Lord. My prayer, my praise, with this tongue I bless God. And then he says, but also we curse men, which are made after the similitude of God. Thoughtfulness, right? There's a thoughtfulness on what we're going to say, when we're going to say it. And there are times, and I didn't get a chance to get through all of them. We'll kind of pick up again next week. Being thoughtful, right? Our tongue can do a world of good. A word fitly spoken, apples of gold and pictures of silver. A word in due season, the Bible says, how good is it? That's a rhetorical question, right? That's emphasis for yes, it's a great thing. Your tongue can be used for untold good. So be thoughtful of it, right? Think about things before you say them. And there are times that it's wise to not. There's times to not say. All right. We'll go ahead and quit today. Let's have a word of prayer. Father, we're thankful